Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Conversations on leadership, life and lessons learned, often the hard way. This week, Bridge and I are joined by another guest, the amazing Kayleigh Lloyd. We are going to be talking about branding and getting into the branding mindset with Kayleigh. How to show up as us, the stories to tell, the deeper meanings behind a brand and more. So please come and sit in on this wonderful chat in Being Your Brand. Well, hello, Kayleigh, and welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Well, it is very exciting. You know, full confession, I know Kayleigh and know quite how colourful and creative her brands can be because she got me taped well and truly for mine. Thank you very much indeed. And so I'm so pleased to welcome you to the show and to introduce you to Bridge, who is equally as interested in personal branding as I am and our listeners. So I'm going to let you have the floor first to tell us a little bit about your story and how you have become what I would refer to as the brand goddess for women in business.
Ooh. Oh, I love that. What a great intro. It was never a position I thought I saw myself at. So the journey is a little haphazard and just winging it, to be honest. It all started with me not being very good at anything apart from being creative and creating, designing. So I followed that path through school, through university, got my first job. And my first job was working for this website company. And I had to literally bash out like 2 websites a day with a brand. So the branding then was, it was for like electricians, plumbers, carpenters, all these people that do not care about brand. And it was kind of soul destroying. But I learned a lot about how to create something quick and easy that, looked smart, did the job. Back in the day, branding wasn't really what it is now. You only needed a logo. And I was thinking about this earlier because nowadays we need so much more than that because we have to create so much content and be in so many places. Whereas before, when I first started, they literally needed a logo to put on a business card and to put at the top of their letterhead. And that was it. Like, that was it. So that's where I started. And then, like many people do, went off towards London way, away from Exeter, Southwest, and worked for a big agency with big global clients. And I learned a lot more about the depths of a brand and the layers of one. One of my first jobs was I had to create 15 brochures for BP and all their technology centers around the world. And so I got given the BP brand guidelines, which is like 100-page document.
Oh, God.
Yeah, university, they don't give you things like this. Just looking through their document was insane. So many pieces, so much information, but really, really interesting. And I kind of loved it.
Kayleigh, can we just go back a little bit? Because I've seen a little bit of your journey with Bobby and the development of her brand and, the amazing website that she's got now and the colours and how it really, like, it absolutely, when I saw it, it absolutely is Bobby. I mean, it just, it couldn't be anyone else. It's brilliant. She was very annoyed when I turned up to a party that she had recently in her brand colour dress. And she's like, those are my brand colours. I said, but they're nice colours. So now apparently I'm not allowed to wear her brand colours. So thanks for that. Anyway, what do we mean by brand? I think that often, as you said, when I've thought of brand, I've just been like, yeah, logo. That used to be, I'm Gen X. So same as Bobby, really, that prior to coming into being self-employed, running my own business, I wouldn't even have thought about what do I mean by brand. It's just a logo, right? And so I'd just be really interested before we go on to your meteoric career history, just to understand a little bit more about what are we talking about when we talk about brand.
It's quite a tricky one, actually, because it's one of those words that I just use, and then I think people take it in different ways depending on their experience and how how they've had to use one in the past through work. Most people don't have to touch a brand unless you're starting your own business or unless you're working in a particular space within a company. But a brand at the end of the day is what people perceive you as, what someone will say about you in a room where you're not there. Like, what are people saying about you? It's an experience, it's a memory, it's what you kind of leave behind and what those people remember from you. So it's not really necessarily anything visual. If I asked you who your favorite brands were, you probably wouldn't tell me your favorite brands were these guys because I like the color of, their shop or their website. You tell me you like this brand because of the experience you've had with it, because of what you got from it, how you felt after working with this person, buying this product. It's that feeling and that memory, which is the brand. Now, obviously, within the brand, there are some different parts of it. So there is the experience, there is that kind of the whole marketing side, there's the approach people take, and then there's the bit that I specialize in, which is the visual identity, which is the logo and all the visual elements, assets that back up the experience, the person, the product. It reflects all of those things in a visual way.
I absolutely agree with Kayleigh. I've now had the experience of looking at my own brand, and it was quite interesting, I think, doing that, having been involved with some level of rebranding in an organization more than once. And I think it's worthwhile saying this while we're talking about being our own brand. I think that, let's just extrapolate that out a little minute for companies. I remember distinctly the last time I did this, there was one of the senior management team who just spent every time we were talking about it going, yeah, but where's the logo? I almost got to the point of saying, if you mention it again, I'm going to fucking smash you in the face, which wasn't very culturally for the brand we were going for. But I think that this is why it would be good to see how we can get into depth for a personal brand, because with a company, that was definitely very much the case. There was the customer journey, what that experience looked like, how that was going to align to value, what was the content, what was the story that you were telling. There was all of those elements before you got anywhere near a color or a symbol or an icon or whatever it might be. And I was adamant with my job, being all around people, that I had to be in the room, because what they would often do, and this has happened to me more than once, that an organization would then go, oh, go and sort out an employer brand. And it would have no alignment whatsoever to the company one. And really, you have to look at both of those things in parallel. So it's about the experience of the people that you've got living the brand as well as the brand itself. Does that make sense, Kayleigh? That was my experience of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The more kind of aligned, not only is what you do with the people you work with and how it looks, it's like a whole ecosystem of things. So if I started working for someone that didn't align for my brand, that's going to have a knock-on effect. I probably won't work my best for them, so my work would be lower quality. They'd probably talk to somebody again who isn't my client or my clientele, my target audience. And you'd start, you've got to just work with the people that you fully align with, and, other companies as well, anyone that you build a relationship with and you might work alongside or something. It's just all about values and alignment, 100%. And I think that's one of the biggest things to learn when you start this journey. The more you know yourself, the more you can start to pick and choose people and directions and choices that will help you grow as you want to grow, evolve organically in the right way, in a space that, empowers you in what you do and your brand.
And actually that maybe moves on to knowing and being that self-aware. If you are trying, whether you're doing it for self-employment or simply in terms of positioning yourself as an expert, for example, to actually know what you want and to understand all of those questions, to understand your why, to understand your values, to understand who you don't want to work with. So in a way, the branding is as much about attracting the right customers, but also in a way repelling the wrong ones. Is that your experience, that often people who come to work with you or want your inspiration and assistance and support just haven't really got a clue what they want?
100%. I would say a lot. Well, even the
I'm just laughing because I can see Bobby's face.
Yes.
She's just like,
We could use me as a whole case study for this recording.
or even the people that come thinking they know what they want, sometimes they start the journey and they're completely wrong, and they recognize that. Like, sometimes I can have a discovery call with somebody and they're talking about something. Usually it's the people that have been in a really corporate space for a long while, and they're coming out to stand on their 2 feet and start their own business, their own company. They're still kind of feeling restricted, I think, or they're just used to being in a space where they've got to be a certain way and they can only show their personality to a certain extent. When they start to strip away at it and you start to open up the possibilities of you can actually be yourself, and with all the quirks, with all the kind of color, with, whatever it is. And I think it's just having that conversation and then opening up the possibilities in front of them. I don't know if it's a confidence, a bravery thing, but they start to take those steps. And it's a journey for everyone, it's different for everybody. But to start owning that themselves and how they want to put themselves out there, it slowly changes. I had a client last year who filled out her questionnaire, was like very, no color. Sorry, Kayleigh, I don't want color. I'm like, that's fine. We don't, just because you're working with me doesn't mean it has to be all colorful. I want it to be corporate, blah, 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 blah. And then we met up and had a coffee. And everything she was saying to me was the opposite of what she'd written in her questionnaire. And I just needed her to hear it out loud when she was saying it, and for her to recognize what she was saying, to like make that switch. And as soon as she flicked that switch, she started just easily being herself, and the possibilities of what her company could be just started to open up before her eyes, and she got like excited. She was like, oh, she ended up with quite a colorful brand in the end, because she was colorful. One of the main things she was approachable, friendly, easy to get on with. And that doesn't really come across in a grayscale brand. It's not that approachable. So it's interesting what you find about yourself when you start this journey, whether it's for your own company or just for, like you say, positioning yourself as an expert and that personal brand.
Can I ask you about, because you clearly know yourself quite well with what you actually do. Stop screwing your face up. Nobody can see that, but just for the listeners, just that you know what you just did. Because so this isn't yay me and my brand, but I think the thing that I wanted to say that I watched you do with me was that you gave me 2 very different options when we actually got down to it, with all the things that I'd garbled at you and I'd filled in on my form. And I literally was all over the place because I really wasn't sure about how I would be articulated. And yet there was a level of conversation with us, and yet what you created did the talking for you. You stretched me completely out of comfort zone with one of them, where I began to realize that it was part of me, but it wasn't all of me. And yet the one that I ended up with made me feel very emotional and really touched. And so you do converse, but you also say so much through your creativity. Can you say something about how that has come to pass?
No.
Okay, next question.
I'm not very good with words, and I'm not very good at explaining really how I do that bit. A lot of people talk about strategy within brand, and if you go to a big company, they'll go to a brand strategist before they go to a brand designer, and then the designer will be handed this like 2,000-page book on the brand strategy. But then I've known many companies that I've worked with that will follow the strategy, create something perfectly aligning with that strategy, give it to the client, and they'll go, that doesn't feel like us. That's not what we want. And so they'll throw the strategy book out, listen to the client, and create what they want. And the client's like, yeah, exactly. So I just work on, as much as I look at audience, I look at the people, the other people doing similar things. I create a feeling and what I take from a person and put that into something visual. And I don't know how I do it. and like with you, there's a different balance between the concepts that I offer. And I think it's that balance in the hierarchy of personality traits, character, approach, experience. The balance is always different within those two concepts. So with you, one of the concepts was all about kind of that bubbly personality side, the really kind of fun element of you, and that kind of real joy that you can bring to people's lives. And then the second one was a much more calm, welcoming space that really leaned into the trust that people give you, but it still had that approachability and warmth, friendliness, but not as much as the other one did. So I kind of try to lean in two directions with the same elements, but just which one's more important than the other. But yeah, layers and just what you want people to see first, second, third, and you know what they find out about you as they start working with you and all those things.
We started with it's an experience. Brand is about having the experience of somebody, usually before you've actually met them, or when they turn up in their party clothes and you make them strip. I didn't make a strip, that's a joke. But Kayleigh said about having the experience of somebody. And I guess when you're looking at the brand, you're looking at the colours, you're looking at the things that draw you or whatever. So you start having a feeling about the person through what's being created. So there'll be a reason why you like those colours, Bridge, for example. So I clearly didn't repel you with my brand. As you turned up in them. But I think from what I've understood that you just said, Kayleigh, it comes from the feeling that you get about the person. So my sense is that there are skills, but with a much bigger dollop from a creativity perspective. But you're a bit like a coach, because it's the active,
Really?
because it's the active listening again and getting a full sense, a full holistic sense of somebody that you then get to articulate through colour and design into something that they can load to business cards, websites, notebooks, whatever it is that they're doing. That's what I heard. I don't know about you, Bridge.
Yeah, I know. I'm fascinated by this idea that you can create a brand or create this feeling with the same elements, but prioritized differently. And I find that really fascinating because, yeah, as Bobby said, for me, that must take a really, really, not forensic's the wrong word, but I think you used holistic, didn't you, Bobby? But it is that sort of really being able to see a person, for a person to be truly seen, and often may not be quite how they see themselves. And that's, I think, completely normal. You know, we see ourselves very differently from maybe how we are perceived. So I find that really interesting. And the fact that then you offer all the different options depending on the priorities of the same elements. And then one of those will speak to the client, hopefully. And they're just like, yeah, that's me. Oh my God, I feel so seen. This is me. I just remember conversations with Bobby while she was going through the process with you. And she's going, and she's got me asking like all these questions, like the weirdest, this weird shit that I have to answer.
What food am I? What flavour am I? What am I in my wardrobe?
What do you wear? What would your brand wear? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know
great
what? Like,
questions now.
they're questions that they were never questions we'd ask like these big global companies. But the women I work with, most of them, a lot of them, are doing these free online workshops where you go through the really typical questions of what are your values? What is your mission statement? Who is your target audience? Blah, blah, blah. And so after you've done it a few thousand times, you're very robotic on your answer. So those are the questions that start in my questionnaire for my clients. But then I find that the most value I get from my questionnaire are the ones where I've thrown in a few kind of curveball questions that they haven't responded to ever before. And you get that kind of subconscious response. What flavor is my brand? Am I zesty? Am I kind of like a strong coffee? Am I like a tequila shot? And it's that kind of response that gives me some of the best answers.
I love it. I think one of the things that's striking me is this sort of element of storytelling within what you're creating or collaborating to create. And this idea that there's, I guess we all have a story to tell, don't we? And often, I guess a brand, particularly personal brand, is a sort of story. Do you have any suggestions or advice for people who are looking at trying to create their personal brand? I get that we need to understand our values, as you said, the values and all of those things, the corporate tick box stuff. But have you got any tips for people
Yeah,
just
and
to
I think
start out?
you were just getting to there, the story, your personal story is the best place to start. Like even before values and mission, it's understanding how you're different to everybody else, and everyone's story is completely unique. It's those small experiences that create these new parts of you, whether it's like a skill set, whether it's your personality. Your story can really shape what you've become, and your story is going to be different to any competitor, anyone else within your field of expertise. Look at your story to work out what's different. Not only that, and recognizing who you are from your story and what you love, what your passion is, what your drive is, your purpose, and all of those things. It's also the piece that you can use to connect on a human level to your audience. There's nothing stronger than a story to make somebody connect with you, trust you, and relate to you. And humans are wired to remember a story better than anything else. So the more you can use your story to connect with your audience, the more you understand your story and why that's unique and what makes you special, then the stronger your brand will be.
I think that's where the more that you're doing that as well, the more that you get in terms of the content that you are wanting to either then summarize for the website, or the thing that you can be putting in posts, or the snippets that you get to add it into the creative in terms of the different layers, and then it can get used again. I mean, it's the best form of repurposing I think that you can come across is a good old story.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those that, yeah, you can be known for, even if like my story's not that interesting at all, but it's built me to what I am today. And part of that story was a lot of, being a mum, being made redundant because, well, probably not because, but just before I went on maternity leave, then with another company, it was just as I'd returned from maternity leave. And that's a big connection I think I have with a lot of the people I work with, is knowing those extra struggles we go through as women, as mums, with the balance of things, that I think I just have that extra supportive instinct in me, that kind of cheerleader, that kind of we can do this, that passion because we want to do it for our kids, for the, you know, people. Most of the people I work with, it's not a profit making scheme, it's a passion kind of that leads and drives them. And knowing that about myself, like I'm doing this, but one passion for creativity, like it's what I live for. It's also that drive that my kids give me to make something incredible, do something good, do something I love so that I can be happy. And all of the women I work with are on a similar kind of journey following with that kind of clarity that that's what they want to build because of, something else other than profit.
I love seeing the whole group of people that you've worked with now that I get to be in the gang.
Woohoo!
Which I rather love. So, Bridge, I'm going to have to work out how I can get you gate crashed into the Own Your Awesome event next year,
Oh,
because
just put your name on the list. It's not that
just,
hard.
just, I mean, that was such an articulation of just a multitude of brands that you have worked with. And Bridge, there are people, they are all slightly minor league bonkers and dance and sing and are really embracing who they are. And I think that the brand piece has absolutely helped with that. It's almost sort of like garnered them even more with what they're actually doing. But there's a definite, clear set of people that you enjoy working with, for definite.
100%. And I think the more I work, the more I know it as well. And when I first started, so I started my business 4 years ago with lockdown and many other women, when we were told to work from home full time while having kids that weren't allowed in nursery, so a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and thinking, how am I meant to do a full day's work while the kids are in the house, one you can't turn away from for a second? But companies weren't open to being flexible then. They were only forced to let us work from home so they couldn't have eyes on us at all times by the government. And so I was like, well, I finally got put on furlough, luckily, when that scheme came in. And so I had the time to spend a little bit of time on myself being creative, because otherwise I get grouchy. We all know this. And then I just started working with people for free to start with, because I was like, I just need to do something creative. I was just going to be like your local graphic designer. Like, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, because I just knew that I needed to be creative. And luckily I just started attracting women, for starters, then like just positive personalities, people that loved what they were doing, and some quirky people. Quirky people are the best. They got so much that I can play with to reflect them, so much vibrancy and energy that I can put into the brand. So definitely love working with people that have a good mix of things, a cocktail of personality aspects and layers to play with.
So here's the thing. So Bridget, has seen some as well now, get to see your finished products, which look utterly perfect. Come on, let's hear about some of the clangers in the last 4 years.
Clangers. So the clangers are the ones that say there's something and then realize they're not. That's difficult, because they think there's something and then they see it and they're like, oh no, Kayleigh, I've told you completely the wrong things. But it's because they're not ready. They're not brave enough to be the person they really are. And they feel like they have to pare it all back and, sink back into their corporate little shell. But it's a mental block. That's the toughest thing, is when they come to me, but they're not actually ready to stand out as themselves and show up as themselves. They still have this kind of corporate mask, which to me feels unaligned with who they are and with the people they're working with. I have a lot of people, well, not a lot, very few actually. I'm lucky I've only had maybe 3 people in 4 years that have struggled to really embrace, that authenticity of their brand, and their brands have ended up, for me, not feeling like a true representation of themselves. And that's the part I struggle with, is when I can see all their amazing awesomeness and they know it, but they're just not, don't feel like they can show it. So that's the trickiest thing I've come up against, and where the brands I've not loved, because I know it's not truly representing them.
Kayleigh, I have seen quite a lot of Bobby's content creation now, which I strongly suspect a lot of it, or the most recent stuff, has been maybe inspired by some of her conversations with you. And it does seem to be this big drive to create content for your brand. And I'm just wondering, I'm not entirely sure what I'm wondering. What was I wondering? Sorry, I'll work on that. I'll get to, sorry, I was looking at something else. How important is content creation in your personal brand? Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, I've been fascinated to watch Bobby's journey in content creation since she started working with you. And I think that still there is one that maybe hasn't yet been launched on the public involving Bobby standing on some kind of roundabout singing to a camera. Not entirely sure what that was about, but it does seem entirely on brand for Bobby. Or maybe it was a massive piss take of Instagrammers. Anyway, we shall see. And I've dabbled in a little bit of content creation myself. I'm wondering what you think. Brand creation and content creation must have changed enormously since you started working in it. If you put future goggles on, what do you think we're going to be doing next if that doesn't involve Bobby standing on a roundabout singing at a camera?
Well, I think Bobby standing on a roundabout singing to a camera is exactly what we're going to need more of in the future as we get AI to make more and more for us. And then only the really human pieces of content are the ones that are going to stand out, the ones that really are unique and the
Yeah.
ones that really represent us and nobody else are going to be the pieces that, you know, people will actually stop scrolling for. I think more things in person are going to become more popular as people again stop looking at the screen maybe, or stop taking stuff in from the screen because it's just noise. It's AI generated noise. So the more that we can do something in person that gets people's attention, and then as long as that journey from that point is consistent and representative of what they've seen or heard about us, then that's the thing that you're going to need to concentrate on. I think obviously it's very important for us to always be seen and heard as much as possible. If you're not good at creating content, either get somebody to do it for you or keep it really, really simple. Just be persistent, consistent, and just keep things minimal, same colors, same fonts. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. But I think going forwards, the more we can do things that, you know, are unique, whatever that means to you, the more personal and really reflective of the type of person you are, then that's what's going to stand out above anything computer generated and that everyone else has something very similar to.
I agree with that. I think as you were talking, and it harks back as well to something that we were saying earlier about that when somebody's not ready. Again, it's a real coaching statement. There's been people that I haven't coached because they're not ready. They're not ready to almost be their whole self, be their integrated self. And I think that becomes even more important when you step forward to decide that you actually want to have a brand identity, because it's got to stack up whether you're putting something out into the ether about work or whether it's just about you in life. So, well, it was a mini roundabout with me standing up and dancing. I guess some people might go, oh, well, what does that convey from a work perspective? Well, we could equally be dancing on the roundabout together if we were working together. So I think that whole thing about absolutely embracing your whole self, be it from the brand or what you're putting out in content, we're back to it. You don't want to have a different persona for work than you do at home. And Bridge, we've talked about this in other episodes, you know, that is exhausting.
Yeah,
If
100%.
you've got
So much
if you've got to be
harder.
two people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also people see through it. I think that no matter how good you are, unless you really are like some kind of complete psychopath, no matter how hard you try, that disjoint between what you're putting out there and what you actually are just starts to show at some point. So we've recently done an episode on networking, Kayleigh, which, you know, for many people is an absolute bugbear. You know, that their bête noire and bugbear. I wonder how those two phrases
Have you noticed she goes off on a tangent? She's worse than...
It's my massive brain, Bobby.
Yeah. It says something about what her brand needs to look like when we get to it.
But, you know, so many people loathe this idea of networking, and we had a chat about this idea of actually it's more about connections. If we look at it as connections, it stops it being this sort of scary, boring men in grey suits sort of activity. How do you think personal branding aligns or fits into networking, if we're going to call it networking, but your connection plan if you are an individual? Let's talk about individuals rather than corporate. So if you're an individual who is trying to make
Well,
your
it's similar to
mark.
what you were saying a minute ago about people seeing that disjointedness. So whether you're the one going out there and being in the room and talking to people, making these connections, or whether, people know you, they go into the room and they're talking about you because they've had an experience with you. It's then from that point when they go on to your socials and they see you chatting, see you dancing, or seeing you looking serious or whatever, that has to be a consistent kind of thing. In their head, they're going to have some kind of perception of what they're going to see when they come to your social media. The more that's what they're expecting, the more they're like, oh, yes, this is the person that I was told about, or oh, this is the person I met, and yet they're exactly like I remember. And it just amplifies that kind of that trust, that kind of brand, that this person is who I've met, and now what I see, they're the same person. Or I spoke to my friend and they said, oh, I just worked with so and so. They were hilarious. I had such a great time. I came away feeling confident. And then if that person goes and finds that person's website and it's like grey, serious, they're like, wait, is this the person that you were telling me? That doesn't look like the person I was expecting to see. Or they're talking about something where it completely disaligns with, a conversation you had, and you're like, wait, does that mean she wasn't being truthful to me, or was just saying what I wanted to hear? Like, now I don't trust that person. So like, that's the last you'll see of them. So it's that continuing that personal journey, whether it's to buy a product, work with someone, or just build upon that foundation of a relationship. It just needs to keep that consistency of, that expectation of that personality and what they're expecting to see next, whether it's a website, a social media, or a conversation, whether you talk to somebody else, do they say the same thing about them? The more all those things line up, all the dots connect, the stronger that relationship and trust will be.
Before we move on to other questions, I'm really aware that I interrupted you in your story. So I'd really like you to finish that so that we don't miss out.
My first job in this big global agency, working for huge brands and their giant brand guidelines, I did notice the first thing that I wanted to do was to add a little bit of something extra that wasn't in their brand guidelines. And luckily for me, 100% open to it. And I think that's a very important lesson I learned from the beginning, was as much as these brand guidelines are there to kind of keep you on a path, they're also a part of the journey, and it's only something to move from and to evolve from, and the more organic that can be, the better. So I introduced a type of illustration to the BP brand guidelines, which was then included in their next round of brand guidelines. It gave me that opportunity to know that anything that I took on, like whichever client, I wasn't necessarily as restricted as maybe I'd been taught. And that's something that I then took into the next agency I worked for. And it's part of what I do now, since starting my business 4 years ago, is that the brand that I create needs to be a starting point, that core of elements that can grow with the person, with their business organically. So instead of a lot of people who don't have brands done properly will get like a logo and colors done, but then they'll patch things on like haphazardly because they're doing it quickly, they're just new idea, blah blah blah. But a really good brand will have that kind of opportunity within it to grow from a central space and feel a lot more organic. So if Bobby started a kind of a side hustle or wanted to infuse a new service or take on a new partnership with somebody, then there's so many options that we can use from this core brand of hers to expand in that direction, because at the end of the day, it all links back to that central point, which is Bobby, which is her personality, which is her values, and it will all connect if, you know, we use the where we are now as a starting point to expand upon.
We're obviously going to post the link to the company in our resources, but just say the name, Kayleigh. Say the name.
The hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my whole life is create my own brand and to even think of a name. And in the end, after many, many ideas, I just came up with Lloyd Creative, Lloyd being my second name, creative being what I do. Like, you know, keep it simple. But it's interestingly enough, I never, or okay, no, I never. The only place you'll see my logo is on my website. I use it nowhere else, my full logo. I use my little icon every now and again, which is two L's, but in like makes a smiley face. That's the only part of my brand that you'll ever see. So the brand I created, I use very rarely. But if someone tells you about me, they don't tell you about my company name necessarily. They'll say Kayleigh Lloyd, and they'll find me on socials from that. It will always be forever hard for me to create my own brand. And I have been thinking, oh, if I ever turned into an agency, what would that be? So it's hard when you're so close to something, isn't it?
Because I love the evolution, because it was making me wonder about a question. I mean, God, my brand's been made for 5 minutes, but I have seen you evolve people's brands when they're doing events and things like that. And of course, you've done that with your own recently as well.
Much easier. That was like, I found creating a event that kind of embodied everything that I'm about so much easier than trying to create a brand that just represented me as me, like this little person that I see myself. But creating an event that was all about cheerleading, celebrating, being yourself, leading with passion, that was easy. And I loved the brand I created for my event, an award ceremony.
But that's because you were doing it for others and not for you.
Exactly. It's weird, isn't it?
There's just a little pokey moment then. I think if I just love to come back because there's been so much in the episode to be saying to anybody listening to this, to thinking about wanting to be on their own journey for brand identity. I think where we've been, maybe not in this order, but start with your story.
Yes.
And the more you can say about that, and the more that you can say about what you stand for and what you're passionate about, that's the crux of it. Probably get away from just talking about values, mission, yada yada. Start thinking food, clothing, and everything else. And everything else besides. You'll be pleased to know, Bridget, when there was that line of questioning, I did not go down the Danny DeVito route of who would play me in a film.
You did talk about it though.
I went for Dawn French because I thought that was
amazing.
If I could be Dawn French, I would be a very happy lady. So yes, the storytelling, there's getting away from the tried and tested and into more of the creative area. And then comes the part where you probably need a Kayleigh, because then it becomes the needing somebody to put you closer to your edge as to who you really are, if you're not there already. Would that be fair?
Yeah. If you're not ready, though, to invest in some professional branding, just keep it really simple. Choose 3 colors, choose 2 fonts. Logos do not need to be complicated. If you're worried about having a company name and you're yourself, just have it as your name. That's what people are going to say in the room anyway, is your name. So the easier you can make it for them, the better. And also, if you're not creative and you don't want to create loads of visual elements and assets, get better with putting your face out there. Faces are more recognizable than anything else. Beyond faces, it's color. So if you can be consistent with putting your face out there and a color then that consistency is going to be memorable and really easy to identify for anybody who's kind of following, watching you.
And I guess then the last thing to say, because we're talking about evolution, is hang in there. Don't keep changing it. Just keep using it in different ways, because the brand toolbox that you gave me, there's so much that I could do with it. It's different every time because of those colors moving around all over the place. Every time I create a new slide, it's something different. So I think that longevity that you give to brands is flipping awesome as well. So yes,
It helps. We've got to do so much, haven't we? There's so much to say.
we have indeed. Yeah, especially me. Do you want to ask our favorite last question, my love?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So normally the question that people are asked is, what would you tell your younger self? And so we have flipped it on its head instead and say, what do you think your younger self could teach you now or would advise you now?
My younger
What
self
wise words?
was very shy, not confident at all. She knew she enjoyed drawing and trying new things, like hobbies. Oh my goodness, my downfall, like anything craft related. My cupboards are full of new hobbies. But she would remind me to be playful with creativity. As soon as you start restricting yourself or doing the same things, that's when you kind of dry up and creativity just leaves you. So being playful and exploring and trying new things is definitely just something that I want to continue, and is why I always try to work with people that do different things and are all different, because doing the same type of brand day in day out would be just, that would be the end of me. So the more different type of people, the different type of creative brands I can create, then I will just get stronger and stronger and enjoy it forever.
So I'm very sorry,
Love
Chippy's
that.
plumbers and electricians, but she now belongs to us. No more of that.
Yes, absolutely. Never again. Oh my goodness, no. That's like what nightmares are made of.
Kayleigh, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
It's
for
been
having me.
wonderful. No, it really has. And I'm sure that people have got a load out there in terms of personal branding. And I think just genuinely you actually helping people out, going, you don't need to come and see me. You can do this amount for yourself. But if you actually want something awesome, you will go and see Kayleigh. I am going to promote you well and truly on this
Oh,
podcast.
thank you.
So thank you very much indeed.
You're
I do
welcome.
have a quote to finish
Thanks,
with.
Kayleigh.
Oh,
Yes. So
Oh,
this
awesome.
is a little thing that we do, Kayleigh, that I come up with something that's not usually from me. So today's one on brand. The only brand you can sustain is the one that is authentically you. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
yes. Here, here.
Boom.
Love it.
Yeah. Super. Right then. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. All of the resources, including a link to Lloyd Creative, are on the More Than a Lumpy Jumper website and the Spotify page. Next week, we're talking about introverted leadership with a very special guest, Michelle Hartley of HR Peak Squad. What exactly are introversion and extroversion? What's an ambivert? How do they impact on leadership? Join us next week to find out in Being a Sparkling Introvert.